After Charlie and Jane's families fell out, Charlie left his first love in a fit of anger and married me. After 2 years of marriage, they are still in contact. They wore couple rings and even hugged each other in front of me. Everyone laughed at me and said I was a ninja turtle. Until later, my sweetheart came back and I filed for divorce. Charlie was furious and smashed everything in the house. With red eyes, he said, "It's not your turn to file for divorce." When I arrived at the box, Kevin was treating the wound on Charlie's right hand. His left hand was clasped with Jane's fingers. Hearing the sound of the door opening, the three of them looked up at the same time. Jane spoke first. "Amy, don't blame Charlie, he fought with others because of me, it's all my fault." As she spoke, she began to cry softly, and the look in her eyes when she looked at Charlie was heartbreaking. Their hands were intertwined, showing no signs of separation. They even openly wore couple rings on their ring fingers. I stood there, vaguely thinking that they were a legitimate couple. It wasn't until Kevin spoke that the word sister-in-law brought me back to reality. He said things were a bit troublesome tonight. The cause was that Ethan, the eldest son of the Ethan family, called Jane a lover in person. Charlie couldn't stand it anymore, so he started fighting with the other person. Although Charlie was also injured, the other party was more seriously injured. Ethan said, "Either you go and apologize or he will call the police." I thought I had heard it wrong, and asked slowly, "Why do you want me to apologize? It wasn't me who did it." Kevin scratched his head awkwardly and lowered his voice even lower. "Ethan did it on purpose, but there's nothing I can do." If the police were called and both parties were arrested for fighting, the entire Charlie family would be brought to shame. By then, Charlie's parents will blame me for not taking good care of Charlie. So, on Valentine's Day, my husband fought with someone else for his first love, and in the end he asked me to apologize and settle the matter. It's funny, Ethan didn't expect that I would actually apologize on Charlie's behalf. After hearing the word "I'm sorry," he laughed. "Amy, are you a ninja turtle? Can you stand this?" The people around laughed along. I lowered my eyes and didn't respond, just wanting things to be over as soon as possible. In the 2 years since we got married, I have cleaned up countless messes for Charlie. Most of it was because he and Jane were fooling around. Originally, the two were in their first love and were an enviable couple. But 2 years ago, Jane's family secretly took over a project from Charlie's family. It caused Charlie's family to lose hundreds of millions. In a fit of anger, Charlie followed his parents' arrangements, left Jane and married me. Everyone knows that Charlie doesn't love me. But after marriage, I still take good care of him and fully deserve the title of a good wife. The others were still laughing, but Ethan was no longer laughing. He stared at me with deep eyes, as if he wanted to see through my heart. Unfortunately, I kept my head down and didn't look him in the eye. My friends next to him asked him if he wanted to play a trick on me again, but Ethan shook his head. He usually has a bad reputation, but tonight he unexpectedly kept his word. After I apologized, he stopped bothering me. But when I left the box, I heard him say, "What a great acting." I went back to the box where Charlie was. Jane was still clinging to him, the two of them almost hugging each other. Kevin asked, "Sister-in-law, how is it?" "Okay," Kevin breathed a sigh of relief. I know he is more afraid of things getting out of hand than Charlie. Kevin's family has completely relied on Charlie's family over the years. He went out with Charlie, but Charlie ended up in jail. Can Charlie's family also take Kevin's family out to play? Kevin thanked me. I nodded and looked at Charlie. "Are you going back home or staying outside tonight?" Charlie pinched Jane's fingers and said in a cold voice, "What, do you really want me to live outside?" "No." "Then what are you asking?" After he finished speaking, Charlie let go of Jane and stood up. He used the hand that was clasped with Jane's fingers to viciously pull me out of the box. I stumbled after him. After walking for a short distance, I couldn't keep up, so I called him softly, "Charlie, walk slower." He pretended not to hear and continued walking out. When we got to the car, he threw me forward. My back hit the car door and I winced in pain. However, the next second, he pinched my chin hard again. Charlie looked down at me, and every word seemed to be bitten from between his teeth. "Why are you not angry?" He humiliated me so much, logically I should have cried and made a fuss. But I just cleaned up his mess calmly without any emotional fluctuations at all. This was very frustrating for him as he had been the center of attention since childhood. It was clearly him who cheated on his wife, but he didn't feel like he had the upper hand at all. Charlie was furious. "Why aren't you angry?" "Because he is not the one I love. I married him 2 years ago out of necessity. I have my own sweetheart. That person is warm and clean, and would never cheat on his wife like him, making me a laughingstock in the city. Because I didn't say anything, the confrontation ultimately didn't go on. It was just after midnight when Charlie and I got home. A new day has come. Jane's message also came, you can see it all, the person he loves most is me. Do you think he will go against the whole family for me? Give up your position as soon as possible, otherwise it will be even more embarrassing to be kicked out later. I read the messages calmly without replying a single word. Just as I was about to put my phone aside, another message came in. This time it wasn't sent by Jane. Is my sweetheart? He said, Amy, I'm back. When Charlie woke up the next day, he found that I hadn't made breakfast for him. He was about to get angry when I handed him a divorce agreement. Charlie, let's get a divorce. He was stunned for a moment, as if he couldn't believe that I would file for divorce. After he read the entire divorce agreement word by word, he smiled. I was so angry that I laughed. Divorce? Charlie raised his hand and threw the agreement back in my face, angrily saying, Amy, how dare you ask me for a divorce? I've been thinking about this for a long time. I wanted a divorce as early as the first time I saw him and Jane staying in the same hotel. Charlie and I had been married for only 6 months at that time. He would kiss my forehead when I wake up in the morning, and would hug me and ask for endlessly in the middle of the night. He said he wanted to have a child with me and live a happy life as a family of 3. I think that living under the same roof can really lead to love over time. Until I saw with my own eyes him and Jane entering the suite hugging each other, and coming out hand in hand the next day. Jane's face was rosy and glowing, filled with dazzling happiness. But that night, Charlie clearly told me that he was working overtime at the company. Later, they became more and more absurd and more unscrupulous. Even when I questioned him, Charlie answered without any guilt, she is the one I love. Fortunately, I never expected his love. So I am not sad even if I file for divorce at this moment. Charlie flew into a rage and smashed everything in the house. He then said with red eyes, it's not your turn to file for divorce. I filed for divorce first, which hurt his self-esteem. Charlie did not agree to the divorce and brought the matter to the attention of both sets of parents. My parents were strongly opposed and furious. Are you crazy? Don't you know what the consequences of offending Charlie's family are? I know, but I feel so tired. 2 years ago, my family ran into difficulties and needed help from Charlie's family. Charlie's parents proposed a marriage. I disagreed at first. But my parents knelt down and asked me to repay them for raising me. If I don't nod, they will die. What can I do? I can only compromise. After the marriage, they got the funds as they wished, but they didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for my situation. The phrase my mother often says is to advise me to be more patient. I've endured it for 2 years, and it's really enough. Whether you agree or not, I want a divorce. How dare you? My dad slammed the table, rushed over and slapped me. Are you still thinking about Henry? Do you want to get a divorce and go find him? If you keep making trouble, I will break your legs. There was a buzzing sound in my ears and I was hit so hard that my head tilted to the side. It took me a long time to recover. Henry, no one has mentioned this name to me for a long time. If I hadn't received that message, I would have thought that I had forgotten this person. My dad gave me an ultimatum, go back and be a good wife to Charlie. Don't mention divorce again, otherwise, Amy's family will no longer recognize you as their daughter. Then just deny it. I paid off my debt to them 2 years ago by sacrificing my marriage. Now that my sweetheart is back, I also want to be myself. But I can't contact Henry. That text message seemed like my fantasy. I called again, but the number was always turned off. Charlie learned that I was looking for Henry and rushed back from the company at noon. I was packing my luggage at that time, and the things he had smashed 2 days ago were still scattered on the ground. He came to me on the messy ground and pulled me over with one hand. Want to go? Did I agree? I endured the pain in my arm and said to him calmly, Charlie, I have already filed for divorce from you. You are not qualified to file for divorce. He shouted loudly, the veins on his forehead bulging. You took our Charlie family's money and now you want to burn your bridges? Believe it or not, I will kill your Amy family. I believe. In this city, the Charlie family is the leading family. I just don't understand. Why don't you agree to a divorce? If we separate, you can be with Jane openly. It's none of your business who I'm with. But if you want to get a divorce or find another man, that's absolutely not allowed. What a double standard. He can cheat on his wife and have affairs with other women. I wanted to get a divorce and then find someone I liked, but he said no. Charlie took the clothes I packed out of the suitcase and threw them all on the floor. Then he looked me up and down with contempt, sneered, and said, all the things on you. I bought them all with my own money. If you want to leave this door, just take them all off. He was humiliating me in the lowest possible way. That kind of condescending attitude made me dare not take it off. But I just looked at him calmly and took off my clothes one by one. With every piece of clothing he took off, Charlie's face turned darker. Finally, after I took off all my clothes, he became completely angry and called my name word by word, Amy. I said expressionlessly, "Can I leave now?" Charlie froze there, his eyes murderous. Since he didn't say anything, I took it as his consent that I could leave. I don't want to get entangled with him anymore. I once thought that after 2 years of caring for each other, even if there was no love, there would be other feelings. When it comes time to part ways in the end, we can always do it in a friendly way. It was not until I was ruthlessly humiliated at this moment that I realized that in his heart, I was nothing more than an object. Charlie's family spent a huge amount of money to buy me here so that Master Charlie could have fun. When I reached the bedroom door, Charlie suddenly caught up with me. With the shadow above my head, I didn't even have time to look back. My whole body was trapped in Charlie's arms. "Are you so impatient to find him?" "Amy, I am your husband." Charlie said this while kissing me fiercely. To be exact, it was not a kiss, but a nibble. He was venting his inner anger in this way. I struggled with my hands and feet, but I couldn't escape his shackles. Even during the friction between our bodies, I felt that Charlie seemed to have an impulse. What did he want to do? Did he feel that the humiliation was not enough and wanted to humiliate him more thoroughly? I was shaking with anger and used all my strength to pull one hand out of his arms. He seemed to sense that I wanted to hit him and suddenly lowered his head to my neck. The voice was low and nostalgic. "Amy. I won't let you go to him. You are mine." In the past, when he was in love, he would call me like this over and over again. It made me think in a trance that the people who were close to me also loved me. "Amy." He was no longer savage, and held my face, devoutly and gently. I knew Charlie was trying to seduce me. When we first got married, I was completely hopeless and just let him do whatever he wanted with a laissez-faire attitude. He thinks I'm boring, so he always uses the softest tone to coax me when we're intimate, asking me to cooperate with him and get what he wants. But today is different. There was no way I could be intimate with him after being humiliated by him. "Charlie, let me go." "Don't let go. If you touch me, I'll call the police." All the charming atmosphere disappeared after these words were spoken. Charlie was stunned for a moment, then slowly looked up at me. The shock in his eyes was mixed with anger, which turned into violence in the next second. He threw me onto the bed, and the uncontrolled force made me lose my balance, and my internal organs seemed to be displaced. "Call the police?" Charlie repeated the words I said, sneering as he unbuttoned his shirt. "Are you going to sue me for marital rape? Okay, then I'll give you some evidence." It was at this moment that I realized how lawless Charlie was. In the hospital, the atmosphere in the ward was solemn. I woke up 5 minutes ago, but I didn't want to open my eyes. Charlie's mother thought I was still asleep, and scolded Charlie in a low voice, "You don't even know whether you are pregnant or not, and you are so reckless. If this gets out, people will laugh at you." Yes, I am pregnant. And it was after Charlie used violence that I bled and fainted. When I was sent to the hospital for examination, I found out that I was more than a month pregnant. But the situation is not good now, and the doctor said that I need to preserve the fetus. Of course Charlie's family wanted this child. 2 years after marriage, she had already given birth many times. As for my family, my parents probably want me to keep the child more than Charlie's family. They told me clearly that if I could have a son, my position in the Charlie family would be secure. Even if Charlie gets tired of me in the future, I will never have to worry about food and clothing as long as I have my son by my side. More importantly, with the child, the bond between Charlie's family and Amy's family becomes even deeper. Even for the sake of the children, Charlie's family will always help our Amy family. But I don't want this child. I was pretending to sleep. But Charlie saw it. As soon as his mother left, he said to me, "Amy, I know you are awake." I opened my eyes, and my gaze was so cold as if I was looking at a stranger. Charlie didn't know whether he felt guilty or something, but he restrained his momentum. There seemed to be a hint of apology in his tone. "I didn't know you were pregnant." "It's okay, I don't want this child anyway." This sentence angered Charlie again, and he sneered, "It's not up to you to decide whether to do it or not. Not only did you rape me during marriage, you also want to force me to have a child for you, right?" I suddenly remembered to call the police and turned to look for my cell phone. I don't know if I left it at home or if Charlie put it away, but I couldn't find it anyway. I got out of bed and wanted to borrow a cell phone from the nurse. Charlie pushed me back onto the bed and said angrily, "Amy, don't challenge my patience again." The door of the ward opened at this time, and my parents arrived. But they weren't there to back me up. My mother rushed over to help Charlie hold me down, and whispered to me urgently, "Amy. Stop it. You want to make a fool of yourself for everyone, right? In their eyes, my physical and mental health is not important. Their face is the most important. What's more, as long as I can continue to be relatives with Charlie's family, it doesn't matter whether I live or die. I am a member of the Charlie family in life, and I must be a ghost of the Charlie family after death." My dad smiled apologetically at Charlie and promised to discipline me. At that moment, I suddenly felt very tired and stopped struggling. My mother used both soft and hard methods to persuade me for a long time in the ward. Seeing that I didn't express my opinion, she just stayed with me. "Amy, don't blame your parents for being cruel. With this child, you and our Amy family will be protected. Don't even think about Henry. Henry's family just received confirmed news that Henry died 5 years ago." I didn't listen carefully to what she said, but Henry's name caught my attention. But why can't I understand what she said? How could Henry be dead? If he is dead, who sent me the message that I am back? I was filled with disbelief and slowly sat up. "What are you doing?" My mother thought I was going out to look for Henry and immediately stared at me warily. But she doesn't know that my hands and feet are so weak that I can't move at all. "Henry is dead. Henry is dead." These words flashed in my mind again, and the short few seconds seemed like centuries. I heard my voice become hoarse. "Impossible, I don't believe it. Believe it or not, this is true." After my mother said this, she heard footsteps coming from the door and thought it was Charlie. He quickly told me not to mention Henry again. But the person who came was not Charlie, but Ethan. My mother didn't know that Ethan asked me to apologize last time, so she was polite to Ethan. Ethan didn't look very well and asked me, "Can we talk alone?" I had a hunch that what he wanted to talk about was related to Henry. Because he and Henry used to be good brothers. So before my mother refused, I agreed. My mother glanced at me unhappily. It was not until I told her that I would stay in the hospital and cooperate with the doctor that she was willing to leave for a short while. Ethan seemed to have guessed something and stared at my belly for several seconds. But he didn't ask in the end, he just said, "There is news about brother ya." I looked at him, and for a moment, I couldn't find words to describe my feelings at the moment. I was happy about the news about Henry, but also afraid that the news was as my mother said. My heart was beating fast, yet it seemed like it could stop at any moment. I waited for Ethan to continue. But Ethan suddenly changed the subject and brought up what happened last time. "Do you really think that the last time Charlie hit me was because I scolded Jane?" "What?" "He was because I mentioned Henry." Ethan said, "Charlie is jealous of how important Henry is to me. When he called Jane a lover, Charlie had no intention of hitting her at all. It was because he said that the person I loved was Henry that Charlie got so angry that he started fighting. He loves you without knowing it." I was amused by what Ethan said. "I really think it's funny. Charlie loves me?" After marriage, he openly entangled with his ex and even hugged her in an ambiguous way in front of me. Making me the laughingstock of the whole city. Is this love for me? I lowered my head and couldn't stop laughing. But as I laughed, I felt a tightness in my chest, as if I would be unable to breathe in the next second. If only Henry were here. He wouldn't let me be sad, let alone let others laugh at me. But why did the person who loved me so much disappear for so long and never come back? When I married Charlie, I was forced to do so, but I was really tired of waiting at that time. Waiting without hope, waiting without anyone understanding. My psychological defenses completely collapsed the moment my parents knelt down in front of me. I thought, since Henry isn't coming back anyway, I might as well be a soulless puppet. Treat Charlie as a partner. If you can get along, then get along. If you can't, then separate. Now I want to break up, but Charlie won't agree. What else? He loves me. Ethan knew I didn't believe him, so he added, "I'm a man too, I can see what he's thinking. It doesn't matter what he thinks, I just want to know where Henry is. Brother ya is dead. Henry died 5 years ago. Died in that avalanche. For the past 5 years we have assumed that he was missing, but in fact we just didn't want to admit that he was gone. Now that the body has been found, we can no longer escape." I covered my aching heart and asked Ethan, "Did you come here just to tell me this news?" Ethan shook his head. "I came to apologize." "What are you apologizing for?" "I sent that message using Yeji's cell phone. After Henry got into the accident, we only found his cell phone through positioning. I originally wanted to keep my phone with me, but Henry's parents disagreed. I don't have the heart to ask how it got into Ethan's hands. I just want to know, why did you send that message? Ethan, I don't want to see you continue to be a ninja turtle next to Charlie. If Brotherya were still here, he would also feel sad. He said that he asked me to apologize that night on purpose. He wanted to provoke me into becoming the flesh and blood Amy I once was. But he doesn't know that I can't change back. Henry is dead, and there is no one left to flesh me out. My mother has been staying with me in the hospital. She wouldn't let me call the police, let alone abort the baby. As for the issue of food and drink, she also made it clear, if you want to threaten us with a hunger strike, it's no use. We can ask the doctor to give you intravenous nutrient solution. I suddenly realized that the so-called family affection is only warm when I make infinite compromises. Once I started to resist, they turned ruthless and even stopped treating me as a human being. Jane came on my third day in the hospital. She avoided my mother's presence, and the Charlie family was guarding my people. I don't know if Charlie had given instructions in advance or what, but he didn't stop Jane. She came to my bedside in a dignified manner and said with contempt, "Amy, stop acting. Don't you just want to use this child to completely separate Charlie and me? I'm too lazy to pay attention to her." But Jane refused to give up. Not only did she scold me, she also scolded Henry. That short-lived guy is so unlucky. If he came back, you wouldn't have been so persistent with Charlie. Keep your mouth clean. Jane sneered. What did I say wrong? If you die before the age of 30, you are still a short-lived ghost, right? Shut up. Jane was startled by my sudden shout. She stared at me intently, as if she was afraid that I would suddenly hit her. After the dead silence, Jane asked me again, "Do you really love Henry that much?" She didn't feel annoyed when she didn't get my answer, she just laughed anyway. But there was obvious bad intention in that smile. "Amy, if you really don't want this child, I can help you. She has ways to get the medicines that I can't get." Jane looked at me with a smile, waiting for my nod. I asked softly, "How can you help me?" Jane was prepared and took out a medicine box from her bag and handed it over. "Eat it, and both you and I will get what we want." I reached out to take it, and just as my fingertips were about to touch the medicine box, Charlie suddenly came in. His face looked very unhappy, and he walked forward and snatched the medicine box from Jane. Just by looking at the words on the medicine box, you can tell what medicine it is. He asked me, "What do you want to do?" I pretended to be funny. "What do I want to do? Didn't you ask her to bring this to me? Why are you acting to me now?" Charlie was stunned when he heard that, and then his eyes brightened. He turned back to Jane. I couldn't see his expression, but I could guess it from Jane's reaction. He was angry. Jane hurriedly explained, "I never said you asked me to get it. She is talking nonsense." "Charlie, you believe me." Charlie held up the medicine box and smiled coldly. "Why should I believe you? Are you trying to kill my child by giving her this?" "No, no." Jane waved her hands helplessly. "It's not that I want to kill your child, it's that she doesn't want to keep the child." "Ms. Jane means, I asked you to bring this box of medicine in? When did our relationship become so good?" Only then did Jane realize that I had tricked her. She exploded instantly and rushed over to hit me. "Amy, you bitch." But she couldn't even touch my hair as Charlie grabbed her arm and threw her away without mercy. Jane fell to the ground and looked up at Charlie in disbelief. "You hit me? You hit me for this bitch? Charlie, if you dare to call her a bitch again, I will have someone throw you out at the door downstairs." I never thought that Jane and Charlie would quarrel in front of me, and so fiercely. Later, Jane became furious and even started to speak without thinking. "If she is not a bitch, then you are a bitch. You, Charlie, are the biggest bitch. You have fallen in love with her a long time ago. Do you think I don't know? I knew that she was still thinking about Henry, and you came back to me because you were so angry. Every time you are with me, you always stir up trouble. On the surface, you asked her to come over to clean up the mess, but in fact, you just want to see her jealous. It's a pity that she just doesn't love you. Even after being married to you for 2 years, she still doesn't love you." Jane's words became more and more outrageous, and Charlie finally couldn't stand it anymore. "Shut up." "I won't shut up." Jane's eyes were full of madness, and her gaze shifted from Charlie's face to mine. She asked me, "Amy, do you know that he loves you?" "I don't know. Even if Ethan told me before, I wouldn't believe it. But now even Jane says so. I originally thought that he came back to me because he couldn't let me go. But later he got drunk and kept calling out your name. He came to me because he heard you calling Henry's name in your dream, and he couldn't stand his wife thinking about other men. Do you really think he cares about this child? He just doesn't want to let you go." It turns out that some words do seem more credible when spoken by a love rival. Although I never considered Jane as my rival in love, she considered me as her rival in love. If she hadn't been extremely angry, if she hadn't had a falling out with Charlie, she would never have said these words. After Jane left, the atmosphere in the ward became subtle. Charlie and I didn't say anything. I don't know what he was thinking, but I was recalling the past. The first time Charlie went back to Jane after their marriage, he did it in a very high-profile manner. It feels like I can't wait to let the whole world know. At that time, I thought he was trying to prove that he cared about Jane. It turned out that I had indeed dreamed of Henry the night before and called out Henry's name. He was jealous and took revenge on me in this ridiculous way. Later I helped him clean up the mess, and almost every time I got home, he would come back soon after. I thought he was afraid that I would tell his parents, or maybe he felt a little guilty towards me. It turned out that he was upset because he didn't see me getting jealous, so he came back to find fault with me. For 2 whole years, he had countless opportunities to make his point clear. But he just didn't say it. They also chose to use humiliation to torture my body over and over again and break my will. Charlie, I suddenly called him. Charlie seemed to be frightened as well and looked up at me suddenly. What's the matter? There was a distinct awkwardness in his voice. I asked straight to the point, do you love me? Charlie didn't answer immediately. I don't know if he is worried about his face or considering something else. Just when I thought he wouldn't give an answer, he suddenly replied, what Jane said is true. He loves me. Everything he did was to make me jealous. Charlie asked, what makes me inferior to Henry? Why do you keep thinking about him? It's hard to explain matters of the heart. It's not that you don't understand, it's that you don't want to love me. Charlie was a little exasperated. He came over, grabbed my shoulders, and lowered his head to look me in the eye. He said, Jane and I are also first love, and we have been together for so many years. But I fell in love with you later, Amy, why can't you forget Henry and love me? Originally, maybe it was possible. If he hadn't gone back to get involved with Jane, if he and I had always been respectful to each other. Perhaps as we spend time together day after day, something like love will emerge. It was he who cut off all my hopes with his own hands, and it was he who pushed me away bit by bit. Charlie asked, what was it originally? It's nothing, you just need to know that I don't love you now and I will never love you in the future. Then I won't let you go either. I felt pain in my shoulders, and Charlie was pulling my arms so hard that it seemed as if he wanted to tear them off. Seeing me frowning in pain, he quickly retracted his hand as if his hand was scalded. In the silent ward, he and I looked at each other. The distance is so close that I can touch it with my hand, yet it seems like we are worlds apart. At this moment, I think Charlie should also feel in his heart that there is no possibility for him and me anymore. The child was ultimately not kept. Even though my mom and Charlie's family have been sending people to watch over me. Even though I didn't go on a hunger strike again, I still lost the child. The doctor said it might be because the embryo quality was poor, so it was biochemically induced. At the same time, he comforted us, Charlie and his wife are still young and will definitely have children in the future. Charlie didn't say anything and there was no expression on his face. But somehow, the way he looked said something without words, never again. Yes, there will be no more children between him and me. Back in the ward, I confessed to Charlie, actually, I took medicine after each incident. So the fact that this child was conceived chemically may not be due to poor embryo quality. Charlie wasn't surprised at all, and said in a calm voice, I know. Then he confessed something, I had actually changed those birth control pills a long time ago. About a year ago, he started to fear that Henry would come back and that I would file for divorce. He thought that if we could have a child, perhaps the marriage would become stronger. As someone who can be soft-hearted and compromise with my parents, I may also compromise for my children in the future. So he has been trying hard to have a child with me. Unfortunately, things don't always go as planned. Charlie also said, I paid someone to find Henry's body. I thought once you were sure he was dead you would stop thinking about him. However, knowing that Henry was dead, my heart died too. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, neither my parents nor Charlie's parents came. Charlie came to pick me up personally. He asked me where I was going. But before I could answer, he said in a low and hurried voice, go home first. The villa has been cleaned up and the broken items have been replaced. There are fresh crabapple flowers in the vase on the table. Amy, begonia. Many people think that because of my name, they subconsciously assume that I like crabapples. But I actually don't like it. The crabapple flower is also known as the heartbreak flower, which means being deeply in love with someone. What I want is for two people to be together forever. During the days I stayed alone in the villa, Charlie came every night. He was guarding outside while I was still asleep. After I fell asleep, he would occasionally sneak in to see me. He thought I didn't know. In fact, I have been sleeping very poorly these days and will wake up at the slightest noise. I just pretended not to know and let him sit by my bed night after night, and then quietly leave before dawn. On the last day of that night, Charlie bent down and kissed me between the eyebrows, and said very softly, "Amy, I'm sorry." He finally learned to bow his head and to apologize. But I don't need it anymore. As he turned to leave, I called him, "Charlie." His back was stiff and he stood there motionless. I said, "I'm not angry, I just want to talk to you. There is still a long life ahead of us, we can't go on like this." He seemed to realize what I was trying to say. After a long while, he turned around and said in a hoarse voice, "You still want a divorce, right? May I?" In the darkness, I looked at him eagerly. Charlie clenched his hands. "What if I say no? Then I will die." Charlie came forward angrily, but the moment he touched me, all his momentum disappeared. His voice became even hoarser. "Amy, he is dead, and you are going to die too, so what about me? You have many people who love you, and I am not the only one who matters to you. But I just want your love. Sorry, I can't give it to you." In the silent darkness, Charlie confronted me for a long time. In the end, he gave in and said word by word, "Okay, I agree to divorce. Thanks, but I have a request." "What?" "You have to live well." "Okay, that's ridiculous. I just don't know how Charlie talked to both sets of parents. In fact, it's very easy to convince his parents. After all, his parents chose me when they were mad at Jane's family. In contrast, our Amy family is not only easy to control, but can also severely irritate the Jane family. Now that the child is gone, his parents don't care too much whether I stay or go. As for my parents, Charlie probably promised them something good. Anyway, the day we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our divorce certificate, both his parents and my parents knew about it, but neither of them came to stop us. He had a slight fever that day and couldn't drive, so he asked Kevin to be his driver. When we met, Kevin called me sister-in-law. I smiled and said, "Don't call me that anymore." Kevin scratched his head in embarrassment. Charlie asked me what my plans were next. I pointed to a car not far away and said that my luggage was on it. "I want to go out for a walk." He nodded and wished me a safe journey. I also asked him to take care of himself. As I turned to leave, Kevin's voice came, "Charlie, why don't you stop him?" I didn't hear Charlie say anything, maybe he shook his head. Kevin sighed, and after 2 seconds, he couldn't help but ask again, "Will you go to find your sister-in-law in the future?" Charlie still didn't say anything. After a long time, I had already walked to my car. When I opened the car door, I vaguely heard a sigh in the wind. I am not qualified. The wind continued to blow forward, causing the crabapple blossoms outside the iron fence to sway. The crabapple trees in this city will soon fall. Just like the story, it has come to an end.